All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the first episode of our new podcast, Behind the Red Line. Welcome to Behind the Red Line, a podcast designed to illuminate maneuvering a broken healthcare system as a patron, patient, and provider. Restricted access does not have to mean restricted resources. This is a new audiovisual podcast you can find on all the process platforms. I'm your host, Alessandra, and please help me welcome my co host, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thanks for joining BTRL, where we're going to examine practical tools for radical accountability, respect, and healing at the intersections of health, wealth, race, class, and gender. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about forward momentum during burnout. We're going to take a deeper look at burnout and how it shows up in our personal lives.
All right. So before we take a deep dive into the effects of burnout and how to pull out of it, how to prevent it, let's discuss what exactly is burnout.
So, the definition of burnout, there's two types of burnout. There's general burnout and burnout that those of us in the healthcare profession experience. Burnout, the general definition, is a state of emotional, mental, and often physical exhaustion brought on by prolonged or repeated stress. Though it's most often caused by problems at work, it can also appear in other areas of life, such as parenting, caretaking, and romantic relationships. However, in the healthcare setting, where most of us are familiar with, um, specifically with its packed workdays, demanding pace, time pressures, and emotional intensity, it can put physicians and other clinicians at high risk for burnout. Um, Burnout is a long term stress reaction marked by emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a lack of sense of personal accomplishment.
Man, burnout, I mean, it's so wide and vast, and it's really, I think, such a powerful thing to have a definition for it. But
Yeah.
how does burnout show up in our daily life? Some of those behaviors and emotions can include not feeling recognized or valued at work, in your workspace, not feeling like people really see you or value the work that you bring, feeling a lack of control or inability to affect your job circumstances. So feeling like you really can't impact what's happening around, like scheduling or resources or projects. Maybe you're constantly short staffed, things of that nature. And then, of course, toxic work dynamics, which in healthcare is embedded into our experience, right? So having unclear expectations on what is expected of you, bullying that we see happening within departments and also across department lines. And of course, in surgery, it's an extremely fast paced environment. And as much as we all believe we thrive when it's that go, 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 that stress can lead to burnout. And then lastly, gaslighting. So again, not having your experience validated can lead to these feelings of burnout.
Yeah. And also, if you work in a slow paced environment, that can also lead to some people to experience burnout, which is interesting to me. Um, there are many symptoms of burnout that can help you identify that you're going through it. Changes in your mood, personality, and even your body. Okay. So, first, we're going to talk about a few um, things that can go on in your head. So, you have depression, anxiety, and imposter syndrome. Um, Imposter syndrome is something where you're feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough for this, I don't deserve this. You don't give yourself any credit, or I don't know if you can elaborate a little bit more into that, Alessandra.
Yeah, it can really be born too out of that gaslighting, and it can make you feel less confident about yourself, less confident about your abilities. Start to question and wonder if the negative or the bad things that are happening around you are because of you, or maybe you feel like you just simply don't belong in that group anymore. Like before, you were in those meetings, you were working with that team, but now you feel like their skill is just so far beyond yours. Kind of can be that, that negative self-talk of like, I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
Is it me that's the issue here?
It's that little voice in your head that's just, it's not good.
Right,
Or
chomping at you.
feeling little or no control over your work, substance misuse. And so we're talking of overuse of vices to the point of excess and harm.
Yes.
And this can be anything, from drugs, alcohol, prescription medications, and even food.
Even food, yes.
Food's a big one. And then diabetes and general health issues are caused by stress. So you're putting your body at harm through all of this. Um,
Man, that's so important that, especially that you're saying that any vice, anything that is being done in excess to the point of harm, could be considered something that you're using to cope with these symptoms of anxiety or depression. Um, Jake Mahue joining us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. He said fast food. Absolutely.
yeah. Gonna stop
Right.
at
And
Dunkin' every
this
morning.
and it may right, like we stop and we get the Dunkins in the morning, or you have to go and stop and get those chicken nuggets on the way home, or get those eat those French fries.
Mm.
Mm.
uh,
So really,
so,
that measuring stick is it harmful? Is this to the point of excess?
right. You find that way to it's a coping mechanism, like
Yeah.
you said. And in our brains, it's like, okay, I know this is going to give me a moment of relaxation. It's going to give me a moment of where I can check out of all the stuff going on in my head and give me
Yes.
some peace and serenity. But unfortunately, a lot of that is harmful. But in the moment, we don't see it as that. It's just a quick fix for what's
Because
going
in the
on.
moment, like you said, in the moment we feel better, and especially if we're not attuned to those chemical imbalances that are now happening, right?
Right.
Because that's what's happening to us under that stress is we're releasing now all these chemicals, endorphins that are not helping us, taking our stress through the roof. And food is gonna do that in a different way. I mean, salt and
Mm-hmm.
sugar are gonna impact how we feel, and so like you said, maybe I eat this Snickers bar now, and I get a little sugar high, and I feel a little bit better, and I don't have to think about everything that's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with them being coping mechanisms, I think that's so important to touch on because past trauma responses that have happened to us prior to coming into these high stress environments can dictate the type of coping mechanisms that we use. And they can be exasperated by what's happening presently. So, if I'm already struggling with a substance abuse issue, if I'm already struggling with overworking, overeating, overindulging in substances, over exercising, even, like we're
Yeah.
talking about to the point of harm. If I'm already doing that, once I get stressed or I get burned out, it can really make that even more harmful for me. And so this is why, especially when you're experiencing periods of burnout, that deviation from your normal self-care routine can be a clue to you that something is off here. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
don't know it's burnout, right? Maybe I don't know it's depression. Maybe I don't know it's anxiety, but I do know that I'm not eating as I normally would. I do know that I'm sleeping less or I'm sleeping more than I normally would. I'm missing activities or dates with friends and family, or even missing, and especially I think this is a really big clue, is when you start missing your self-care habits. So maybe you've gone a couple days without taking a shower. Maybe you've gone a couple days without brushing your teeth, or you're skipping meals, you're not drinking water. Those type of things can be a clue to you that maybe my mental state is starting to come into a space that's not so healthy for me.
Yeah, and at first it might seem like, uh, I kind of need a shower today, but I'll just take one later tonight.
Right? I'll
And
just take
then
one.
then you end up not taking one later that
Then
night.
then later that night you're so tired you don't take
Yeah,
the shower.
but
The
then
morning you get up too late, you got to get out the door, right?
yeah, and then you in your head, it's like you start to like, okay, I know I need a shower, but then you just you keep pushing it off. Same
Keep
thing with
pushing.
brushing your teeth in the morning. Like there's so many people that have gotten to that point where it's just like, you start to just that those important things just don't become priority anymore. So,
Absolutely.
what are some of the ramifications of prolonged burnout? Okay, you may miss these symptoms appearing in your life, and you may not even know that you're going through this period of burnout. But as it goes on, you can experience things like early career burnout, quitting your job or your passions, being unable to fit into a new environment that may deter an employee from staying in their positions.
Oh
Um,
yes.
and through some of our research here, we actually found that millennials are at a higher rate of experiencing burnout, and Gen Z is quickly catching up during the pandemic due to the blending of work and personal life. So there's a link that we'll share with you guys in the chat in a bit. which we thought was really interesting. That, through the pandemic,
Mhm.
obviously, there's a lot of stuff that's going on with burnout, but to find that millennials are at a higher rate of experiencing burnout, I think the percentage was like 80 something percent of millennials to about 70% Gen Z workers
Wow, which
were
is so
were going
intense.
through that burnout. Um, Also, mental health crisis occurs when the behaviors may harm themselves or others. This situation needs immediate attention, such as calling a crisis hotline or visiting the emergency room. So, again, like if you are going through these periods of prolonged burnout, eventually some people may have a mental health crisis where
Absolutely.
it becomes an emergency, and they got to get to a facility, and they need help. Um, so the crisis hotlines can help you through that, or going in the emergency room can help with that, like set you up
Yes.
with the long term goals there. So
Right. I mean, it's just like anything in healthcare. When you're in that crisis, you want to triage. You want to get that person in a safe space and make sure that they don't have any tools to harm themselves. Get them stable, and then we can start talking about a long term health plan. And my hope, especially with Behind the Red Line, is to demonstrate that we all have, gone through mental health issues. A lot of us, a lot more than we talk out loud, have experienced mental health crises, and it's important for us to be honest and authentic about that, so that our partners and our peers know that it's okay. It's a safe space. They can get the help that they need. Earlier today, Rebecca shared a post on Facebook about veterinarians and the fact that suicide rates for them are extremely high and have been going up during the pandemic. And that was news to me. I hear it about healthcare workers, I hear it about vets, but I had never heard it about veterinarians.
mhm.
And the statistics said, I think it was 1 in 6 have experienced thoughts of suicide.
Yeah, and it's been one of the high the it's been a profession with one of the highest rates of suicide for many years, even like before pandemic.
Wow.
It was going strong there, and um, a lot of my former colleagues have had losses in their like community, and it seems like every year there's somebody new, especially during the pandemic. There's a whole that's for a whole other like
Right.
topic, but the veterinary field experienced a whole influx during COVID and put immense pressure on a field that's already really emotionally
Already,
taxing.
already so much empathy required for the pets, for the patients, and then just this kind of layering, right? And if we don't have the tools there to really handle this stress, it can come out in ways that are detrimental,
Yeah.
right? And that we can't come back from. So we definitely will be talking about things of that nature. And I do, just for anybody that's joining us, want you to know that at the bottom of the screen, I do have the phone number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. This is available 24 hours a day. You can simply call this number. They also have texting versions if you don't feel comfortable to talk on the phone. You can text, and that person can just be there for you as an immediate confidant if you do feel like you have a plan in which to harm yourself. So thank you for sharing that about the veterinarians. I think that it's important for us to know what each other is going through.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome.
Um,
So oh, go ahead.
nope, I was just going to say it is important to know how everyone is affected, because this stems like I was saying earlier, does everybody in any type of career can experience burnout. So to
Yes.
be insightful, healthcare, we have our own, and then outside it's different within other careers. But it's important to be aware that as humans, we are all linked by these potential situations. So we have
Absolutely.
to have empathy for each other.
Absolutely. And then hopefully, knowing that it changes the way that we deal with one another. One of the things that stuck out to me in that post was what was stressing the veterinarians out. And they talked about just unreasonable expectations, right? We're familiar with that. Just having really harsh conversation from their patrons. We're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it really is something that can happen across the industry, any industry.
Yeah.
All right. So burnout, in addition to affecting us personally and mentally, can also impair our relationships. And This may show up as apathy for some folks. So this is another space where we really can take a moment to step back and think about other potentials when we run into someone that's in a negative space, right? So if you have that negative Nancy person that every time you talk to them, they're always down or it's always an issue, maybe rather than us taking the approach of, oh, well, oh, here she goes again, there's Nancy again. Maybe we can recognize it as a potential sign of burnout. If she was previously engaged in that work and now it's just clouds, just Eeyore all the time, that may be demonstrating that she's losing a connection with her job. And it could be also a symptom or sign of detachment, of not being able to register certain feelings in your body, and an increased friction in communication. So maybe this is a person that doesn't normally say too much, but now all of a sudden, every time you talk to them, it's an issue, or it seems negative, or it seems like it's difficult to talk with them. Yeah. So another way that this can show up in activity is losing interest in your passions or your projects that you were previously excited about, things that you would normally run to as coping mechanisms or ways to de-stress, that now all of a sudden you couldn't care less about them. That could be a sign or a symptom to you that you're experiencing burnout. So thank you, Sarah Cruz, for joining us. Sarah says, speaking the same language in patient safety starts the frontline professional across all sterile processing fields. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. All right. So especially because we're talking about something that is such a wide topic, burnout in healthcare, we hear it all the time, but what does it look like in your everyday life? And that's what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about next, is our personal experiences with burnout. Because I think it's important, again, for us to just be authentic and let people know that, yeah, me too. This has happened to me too. And actually, in that it's happened to me in multiple times across my career in various ways. Sometimes I've been able to quickly realize that maybe something's off in my my routine, like with those showers, like, okay, wait a minute, that's not my normal, let me pull back, and I can take some time to really recharge and get myself back in the game. But there's also been times where I did not catch the signs for myself. I did not catch myself becoming apathetic. I didn't catch myself getting out of my routine, about not communicating with the folks I normally communicate with. And one of those experiences for me was when I took my first manager position. I was a young SPD leader trying to get in the game, and had a really big account where I was new to leadership, but also new to a trauma facility of that magnitude. I had over 100 cases a day, over 50 employees that I was managing. And of course, in SPD, I don't have to preach to the choir about how sometimes we have limited support staff, or who have equipment issues, or issues with our staff, and can just really, really become overwhelming. And so I ended up having the experience of experiencing like depression, anxiety. And for as much as I love sterile processing, I found myself in a space where I just could not physically make myself get up and go to work. And that was when I knew something is wrong, something is off. And this is not something that I should just power through. I should probably talk to somebody about this. So I was able to, because I was working in the hospital system and had my insurance, I was able to go and talk with a therapist, and they were able to give me a long-term plan that gave me some immediate relief so that I could experience just having some peace and some calm, but also that long-term plan to make sure that I stayed in a safe space and I got the attention that I needed as a patient. And one of the things that I remember most about that experience was the imposter syndrome. Because I felt very much like maybe I'm not good enough to do this. I'm not good at my job. Maybe I just need to quit. Maybe all the problems in this department are all me. It really shrunk my vision down into a tunnel of, okay, it's got to be me. It's got to be me, because I'm feeling all of this and I don't see everybody else feeling this. So it definitely can become detrimental. It changed the way I showed up as a leader and as an SPD professional. Rebecca, have you ever had any experiences with burnout?
Yes, mine is similar to yours as far as the facility goes. I think I've experienced it in multiple careers and at different places. But this specific instance was my first time as an educator at a level one trauma hospital. Over 100 cases a day. We had about 55 employees in our department. And it was something where it was complete culture shock to me. I've worked at trauma centers before, but never, not only when I was first starting off as a technician. So not realizing everything that's going on and it's just brand
Right?
new, right off,
Because it is different working
So,
trauma as a tech versus working
right.
in leadership.
Yeah. And then when I came back into the trauma hospital world within the leadership team as an educator, it was a massive culture shock. There's a lot of infighting in my situation, and leadership had been switched out numerous times.
Yes.
Like over the past couple of years, they've had managers and directors cycle through constantly. So the team was in a bit of a, the morale was very low. And the facility also had consultants coming in and out. Saris was there for a while. And it was just, again, cycling through leadership over and over again. And it was very difficult. When I felt like as a new educator, I did not have a support structure. I didn't have anybody in my facility I can turn to help me with what my job actually was and what the expectations were. They're like, "Oh, here you go, first day of the job, like you got this, right?" I'm like,
Go for
"What?"
it.
Like I don't even know how. So it was just finite. That was very hard. And I was so proud to be in that facility and in that role. It was something I wanted to do forever.
Yeah.
And just because I love
Yes.
training and I love working with people and I love educating people. It makes me
Yeah.
feel good. So here I am in this facility that's like breaking me down. I mean, my crew is awesome and I got a lot of love from the technicians that I helped get certified and
Oh,
just taught
yes.
things to. But like driving to work, I wanted to drive into telephone poles. Like I thought about running off the road a lot of times. Like I was real reckless. Like I've always been kind of like a speed demon, but like sometimes driving home at night, I'm just being reckless. So it was, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I left. The position I was in at prior to taking that on actually still had my old job left as an evening lead tech. So I went back, and all of a sudden it was like I could breathe. It was phenomenal. Like I couldn't believe it. And I started therapy as well. And it was one of the best. It took me over 30 years to realize that, talking to a therapist is pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome.
So, like, and it was through that, I gained a lot of weight when I was working in that facility too. Like I hit my highest weight. I got up to about 320 pounds.
Preach on that, right? Through the stress eating and the not eating.
Yeah.
Because I would go these long stretches without eating. And one of the things that one of my personal trainers showed me was that your body thinks that it's starving now. So it's actually holding on to weight because you're not eating consistently. And yeah, during that burnout period, I was at my highest weight. I was nearly 500 pounds.
Yes.
And it took me better part of a year to drop down 100 pounds after that experience.
Yeah.
Man.
It's amazing when you're able to step out of the situation on your own, which takes a lot of courage and a lot of inner. That is one of the hardest things to do, to step out by yourself and take a look at your surroundings. But if you have a therapist or another mental health professional to help you realize it, that's perfectly acceptable. But kudos to you for taking that step, because it's not easy.
Man, it's not easy. And burnout is definitely one of those things that can isolate you. Through these behaviors, you can find that you're not talking to the people you normally talk to. You're not engaged with your friends. And especially when you're at work, right? There's only so much personal life that's supposed to come through those red doors, behind those red lines. So it can become really isolating, the things that you're experiencing personally versus your work. And I so appreciated what you said about the fact that you, prior to having that experience of burnout, you were really excited about this position. And I remember that about mine. It was huge that I had landed that.
Mhm.
The system was really big. It was a primary facility for them, a pediatric tertiary hospital. So like it checked off all my all my boxes, and gave me a lot of projects that I would otherwise not have had an opportunity to work on, like moving hospitals or starting cardiac surgery lines. But that was definitely how I could tell I was not, my head was not in the game anymore.
Mhm.
The stress had just taken me completely and totally off focus.
And I also went through the imposter syndrome like you did too, and it was terrible. I've never looked at myself like I've always been somebody that had goes through that, and like whether it's a lack of self confidence, lack of self esteem, but when I was at this facility, it just sounded like I was in a chamber and it was just constantly bouncing around in my
Yes,
head. It was terrible.
terrible.
Um, so that really started ramping up really hard.
Definitely. And the amount of energy and focus that you're as you're spinning these thoughts, it really led me to hit a wall, especially with depression and anxiety, especially with suicidal ideation, because I hit a point where I was so stressed that my only thought was, "Ugh, I want to end it all. I want it all to be over. I don't want to think another thought because this is too much
Yeah.
for me, right? Even the basics of life were too much for me." And I contend that there were definitely points along that route that I could have seen what was coming. But because I didn't have this information about, okay, Alessandra, okay, notice that your routine's off. Notice that your passion for your projects is off. Notice that your thought process is really dark. And that's not your norm, because it piles up on you, right? It's almost like Denard talks about on the process, boiling the frog, right? And you don't really notice, like you said, your environment around you has changed so dramatically. So definitely leaving that environment, taking a break, not pushing myself to power through it, not pushing myself to work 24 hours a day, take the night shift calls, come in at 6 a.m. and just keep going and keep
Yeah.
going. And once I was able to get out of it, it gave me enough breathing room to build a new support system around myself. And that might look different for everybody. We're for us, it looked like therapy, which led to a whole other gamut of things that we'll talk about a little bit later. But maybe if that's not for you, you could start by reaching out to a friend that you feel comfortable talking with, or a spouse that you feel comfortable talking to. There's also services at work that we're going to get into here. So once you're in a place where you've recognized that there's some mental exhaustion going on, there's some burnout going on, it can be difficult to reach for your support system, but it really is required that you do so that you can really allow room for recovery. So some of the tools that I used were seeking support from my immediate manager. So that was a peri-op director at the time, and I was able to go to her, talk to her about what was happening for me mentally, talk to her what was happening for me with work that had, just become so stressful, and we were able to navigate some things that could come off my plate, or some spaces where she was able to offer some additional support. She also recommended EAP, which, if you work in the healthcare space, you may have heard of. EAP is the Employee Assistance Program. I've never been in a healthcare facility that didn't participate in some form of this, but essentially it's a third party program that the hospitals contract with in order to offer these support services to the employees. So they're totally confidential. You can call EAP for a plethora of issues. If you're having
Mhm.
struggling with mental health issues, time management, anger management, childcare, anything that you need support with as an employee, EAP may have some resource that they can direct you to. So that was one thing that helped, and EAP was what helped guide me out to seek a therapist. They gave me some quick tools that I could use, like breathing techniques. They gave me just reminding me about taking my breaks, my full breaks, and not working through them.
Yes. Uh, EAP also, for those of you that are in locations where finding a therapist or a mental health professional is extremely difficult, like there's a huge backlog right now in the mental health field, but EAP can help hook you up, get seen faster. Um, so just think about that,
Yes,
because if you're trying to seek out a therapist and you can't find one because they just wait list after wait list after wait
yes.
list, your work can get you in with theirs. That's really something to keep in the back of your head.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, because that's really
It's
important.
important. It's not easy.
No,
Right now.
navigating
To
mental
find
health.
this stuff.
I was about to say, and this was years ago, and it was a challenge. And so I can only imagine where we are now with everything being exasperated out of COVID.
Mhm.
Um, and also even with the virtual services, it can be helpful to some folks to be able to have their appointments as virtual, and then for others, it's not as the best method of care. So things really changed around, but that is one really good tool to help you kind of move yourself up the list. I also recommend being very honest about where you're at and how you're feeling, so that your medical professional can triage you appropriately and give you the help that you need. You know, if you come in and you are feeling suicidal, but when they ask you, you tell them no, they're not in a position to help you.
Right.
All right. Something else that helped a lot for me was relaxation techniques, and building this into my days. So physical movement, that was when I fell in love with Olympic weightlifting. Still my favorite way to get stress out. Also my med ball. I slam that thing whenever I just can't take it anymore.
That's awesome.
Or ropes, battle ropes. Those were my favorite. Lifting, deadlifting, slamming my med ball, and my battle ropes. But also meditation, being able to fit that in. For me, meditation looks like nature walks. I can't do the sit and just that's not my forte.
Yeah.
But finding a way for it to work for me was really important because the act of meditation was so helpful. Being able to calm my mind, being able to notice thoughts without diving into them. It changed my relationship with the way that my mind was working at the time.
Yeah. Um, for me, I had to find tools to manage my stress like ASAP because I also have a couple of autoimmune disorders. Um, Full transparency, I have multiple sclerosis, and it is something that is triggered by stress hard. So
Yeah.
it can exacerbate symptoms, put me into a relapse. Daily, I suffer from extreme fatigue and cognitive cog fog, is what they call it. Um, so when I'm incredibly stressed out and upset, all of these things flare up. I can't make sense when I talk. It's great. But the thing is, finding ways to manage your stress can really help when you have issues like this. So that involved things like managing my daily routine, making sure that I was getting proper amount of sleep every night. It is so hard because if your mind is racing and you have all this stuff going on, it's not like you can just shut your brain off at night and go to sleep.
No.
So if you're able to talk to your doctor about it, talk to your doctor about it. Maybe you need some type of medication to help you go to sleep. At first, I did, full transparency, but over time, sometimes the melatonin is just enough for me to just relax. But then I kind of moved on to, okay, like you need to exercise. You need to get some physical, you need to get your energy out through some physical stuff. And for me, it was mostly, going for a walk in the woods with my dog, just being out in nature really helps me to de-stress.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not enough. It's never enough. Being mindful, focus on your breathing and feeling in body and emotions with no judgment, being aware of your body.
That is explosive. Being able to feel into your body with no judgment. Because especially when you're in that negative mental space anyway, you can get really negative on yourself and nitpick yourself, which doesn't make you feel good, right?
No, it's bad.
So go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, also though, in that sense too, like you're like, my back hurts. I work really hard. Doesn't mean you have to grind. Like, rest.
Rest.
Ice your stuff. Heat your stuff. Stop. Take care of your body. Yes. So the number one tool for me was learning how to ask for help and reinforce my support system, because I've never really been someone. It takes a lot for me to ask for help. It was something where like I could always ask my friends and other colleagues in the industry to help me out. Because I had a closer, more intimate relationship with them. But when it comes down to like my superiors, it was always something where, because of that imposter syndrome, I was like, I can't ask for help. They're gonna think I'm not doing anything.
Yeah.
I
can't handle
it. I can't handle it. Like,
yes.
They already think that I'm not pulling my weight. So says the head.
Right.
So why am I gonna ask for help? So trying to slowly learn and ask for help was a huge thing for me. And again, therapy,
Yeah,
that it changes your way of thinking. There's no shame in it. It's great. I
100%.
highly suggest it. Um,
100%.
yeah.
Was extremely impactful for me. That thing you said about asking for help, yes, because no, I did not for a long time,
Oh,
and I'm not sure who our Facebook user is. Maybe you can drop your name, but somebody said burnout could take anywhere from 2 to 4 years to completely recover from, and yes, depending on the severity of that burnout, yes, it can take that long to recover from, and especially one of the things that I learned through therapy was this didn't just happen overnight. You know, just because you're now suddenly feeling like you can't get up and go to work doesn't mean that it just happened today. This is something that has been taking place for over time, that has led to this moment. So, yes, take your time, be gentle with yourself. Once you recognize these things and being able to pull yourself back.
also, establish boundaries. It is very hard to do that, way easier said than done, but you have to start setting boundaries. Like Alessandra was saying, take your breaks.
Yeah, take your breaks.
Even if you don't want to eat because you're too stressed out, go for a walk, step
Yes.
outside, take your scrubs off, and go outside. It can help change the mechanisms in your head
Mm-hmm.
and just slow you down a bit.
Yeah.
Um, but setting those boundaries so when you get home from work, you are able to unplug and switch into your life instead, that work life balance.
Yes. So you had touched on that earlier about millennials and Gen Zs having experience of higher numbers of burnout due to the blending of the work life space. I thought that was interesting because so many of us want to be able to work remotely, but now also this remote work is making it so that work life balance is more difficult. Because,
Mhm.
I mean, come on, right now we're at home, producing these shows, or we're at home on our Zoom meetings, and maybe now it's not, where I drove into the office. Now the office is across the hall. The office is behind me in my bedroom.
Right.
All right. So, Ofui, thank you so much for joining in. Ofui said, drink some water or have snacks. I highly recommend both. Make sure that you keep something on you, some snacks in your bag, water around you, so that you can snack on these things, especially when eating is not on top of your mind.
Right.
There were times where I just snacked because I knew I needed to. I know my body needs this. I don't feel hungry. I haven't felt hungry, but I know that I haven't eaten. Right, so that can definitely help.
And it's important that water. Okay, so a
Water.
lot of us thrive on coffee. Like I love caffeine. It's bad. But if you don't have the balance ratio, guess what? Your anxiety and your depression is going to get worse. Your
Yeah,
anxiety is going to go through the roof if you aren't hydrated.
yeah.
So please make sure that, and I've learned this the hard way too. So make sure you're trying to balance it out. For every cup of coffee you have, drink a cup of water on the side.
Whew, that goes for your juice and your soda onion.
Yeah, for
Right?
everything,
For
anything with caffeine in it.
everything.
And if you work in a department where your break room is far away, like that can be difficult
That can
too.
be difficult. And I love that you said that because it's something that as leaders we can make sure we also have these things for our staff. We joke about how people are always giving us food at work, but this is part of where that comes from. Especially when you're in places like the OR, it's not uncommon for you to see things like peanut butter or crackers or
Yeah,
juices to be stocked in the department for this specific purpose because we know you're going to need it. We know you're going to need to keep that blood sugar up. We know you're going to need to be at that heightened state. So we keep those things in the room for you. So uh, no matter what industry you're in, because remember, this can happen to you anywhere. I was just spending the weekend talking to a student about how they experience burnout in their classes, right? This can happen to you anywhere. So you might want to think about, are there things that you could put in the office? Is there a office water cooler that can be brought closer
mhm.
to the work area? Are there little snacks that you can store in there? Granola, different nuts, whatever is quick and easy and has a nice little shelf life. So, if you forget about it, it's okay. Grab it when you need it. All
Yes.
right. So hopefully this first episode of the Behind the Red Line podcast was helpful for you. We talked a little bit about what burnout is how it can show up in our daily lives. Rebecca and I talked a little bit about what our authentic experiences of burnout were, and also what some tools are you can use to really kind of help yourself rebound and recover. Um, and I want to thank everybody in the comments. Oh, Fui says spend some of the department account. Staff deserve it. Yes.
Yes.
And if you don't have it, get it in your budgets, okay? It can be done. All right. So thank you guys so much for listening to Behind the Red Line. I'm your host, Alessandra. This is your co-host, Rebecca. Today we took an authentic look at burnout, its effects, and how to get you back to a healthy space.
And you can find this episode on our LinkedIn at linkedin.com/company/BTRL, on Facebook and on YouTube. Be sure to like the channel, and if you found this helpful, please share it. We're going to be doing this bi-weekly on Mondays at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And just to give a little shout out to the process co-host Denard, make sure you guys head over there to that YouTube page, like, share, and subscribe. You'll get notified for all new episodes of Behind the Red Line, as well as the Process podcast. All right, everybody. We will see you on Monday, 11th,
Yes.
April 11th at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.